And I forgot to hit record. Sorry.
I would like to contribute to it.
Yeah, Sheila, please.
I believe for once we should have professionals in positions where they should know how to react to a situation like this and to look at the behaviors of other people and I took a class of behavior modification before, and I know you can condition behavior and unconditioned stuff, and and learning about people's behavior and dealing with mental health issues also, that it needs to be addressed. Poverty, lack of education in our school district, with which is presently leading our children into crime and into possessing guns, and they're getting it at early age. Is so available, and why is it available, and where is these guns coming from? I have three sons that's in prison. Two is in prison right now, and one is out of prison for guns. Okay, and my nephew has been killed. A couple nephews and cousins and stuff like that is really ridiculous. And if they can, another thing is if they can all of a sudden get cops, policemen together to go out and stop drunk driving. I think they should be able to go out and do something to stop these guns from circulating in our city. And it has to be done now, and they looking at putting them in jail for longer time. Okay, there is many reasons why a person possesses a gun, and it's not only just to go out and kill somebody, and we have to look at that because we can't, we just can't see our young men and women being killed in the street or going to jail. We need to have them productive citizens and do something. And I believe that these people who we vote in office should know about what is going on. We can't just be dummy to what is going on and not see it, and everybody don't know what to do. We got all these murders here and we don't even know who's doing the shooting. We got too many unsolved shootings going on. And I think that caused that is dangerous because the shooters are still out here, whoever they may be.
Right. Sheila, can I ask you a follow-up question to something you said?
Yes.
So what's your take? What do you think about using incarceration to try and control this? Do you think that works or would work if we did it more?
If they had the services in the prison that they need to have to rehabilitate people, it would be okay. People, we have to teach the kids at a younger age that one day that they can own a gun if they do the right thing. It's only take some more years, to be patient before you pick up a gun, to be able to carry one.
That's interesting. That gives me a thought in my head, but I need to process it. I don't want to just blurt it out.
Okay.
I don't know how well that would go. Like start teaching kids about guns. I don't know. That's the thought.
They have to learn. They have to learn early at these age. It's not. They don't have to pick it up. They can learn that guns are dangerous.
Yeah.
If it's not used right. And I grew up with Officer Friendly. And what is that? The fire, the bear with the fire that put out the fire. See, these kids don't have that these days. We don't even have any kind of outreach from the police department that goes out into the community and communicate with our kids about safety. Even our fire department don't do that anymore. I remember when I was 2 years, when I was not two, I was probably in first grade or something. We had to do a fire plan to get out the house. They don't even do that in school anymore.
Right.
You know, it's a lot of things that they're just overlooking. You know, and I believe that they have to be doing it on purpose, because sometimes you got to understand this violence is a business also. You know, people make money off of people being murdered in the street. I hate to say it, but they do.
Right. I think Linda, I see you, but Bonnie was trying to say something. So I was going to ask if she wanted to jump in, and then I'll come to you. Bonnie, you're muted. So I don't know if you're talking, you're muted.
Six. I'm unmuted. Yeah, some of the things that are just been pointed out are things that have been on people's minds a long time. So what I'm going to say now, I don't want to be seen as not being attuned to some of those things. But the issue of who has the guns and who gets them and who doesn't get them and how they get them, it's been a constant pursuit, and it gets pretty kind of strange and hard to identify. It's pretty clear that, you know, some of this is coming from both this country to other countries in the form of the drug habit, and then other countries in form of some of the not so great things we treated people in Latin America years ago. And so their countries have been, you know, in struggle and angry. And once you get into this situation where you're desperate, you know, guns just become part of the, you know, I think anyway, at least that's the weapon of choice. Now, one thing we might want to do is just something, the take down the carousel issue on the beach there. One of the things that they did, and I'm not that able to go to a lot of their meetings anymore, but I went to one of the meetings and they actually had the FBI man there, because it wasn't to, you know, kind of beat each other up. It was to kind of, for this very reason. And there was some clarification made, but it still isn't one of those things you can say, well, here it is, and here's the answer, and because they are, you know, befuddled too about how you stop some of these guns. And one of the things that seems to be kind of paramount is that, at least that's what seems to come, is that the guns are actually, you know, New York State has pretty much a reputation of being one of the more rigid people in gun control. Now, it may not be perfect, which we could talk about that at some time, but the problem is that the places around us, Virginia, and et cetera, they seem to have less and less of rules about these things, or restrictions, even basic restrictions, like, you know, a kind of a check on your background and stuff in terms of mental health and stuff. So it seems to, you know, be that I hear that repeated all the time. And I guess the stopping of it becomes, you know, really difficult to, because some of it's attached to the drug thing, some of it's just, you know, as I said, people getting money because there's fewer laws. And they also, when they met with the guys from the FBI, this was another thing they found. I think the impression I got from the FBI, though, was one of the interesting little side things was that these were people who they were, you know, the guy who was from the FBI was a kind of leader, was probably about 33 years old. And then the people working with him probably in their mid 40s. And I say that because you could tell that their, what's the right word here? Their initiation into community stuff, you know, meaning the whole realm of basic community stuff in urban areas was not that strong. I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, that they just refused it. You could tell they hadn't had a lot. And so that was one of the things the FBI talked about, is we need to have more. Now, you know, whether you want to get the FBI more involved or not is also something to talk about, because, you know, we don't exactly always identify with them. But that does give some clarity to, you know, what to pursue. And I think that's a tough thing about this stuff. We have to be careful not to make ourselves, you know, you can burn yourself out with this stuff, because it's very difficult to get here is the solution. So, that's my thought.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And we have acknowledged that there isn't one solution. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I saw Linda's hand, so I was gonna call on her, but I also want to make sure at some point we hear from folks who haven't been here before, but that's totally cool. Linda.
Yeah, I just have a question for Sheila. I'm really glad Sheila is here. This is the first time during the group meeting that we've heard from somebody with experiential level experience. Sheila, I'm sorry to hear your two sons are in jail and your cousins have been killed. And I guess I'm just thinking that it's these kinds of bottom-up experiences where I think solutions and policy ideas are kind of going to come into the conversation. And I guess I just have a couple of questions for you. So, at some point you said, well, why don't they know this stuff, and why aren't they hearing about it? Were you kind of referring there to City Council or our elected representatives? This
I got to go
this
back.
group, as Dave suggested, is to kind of hold our elected officials to account. And so why aren't they hearing about this stuff, and who should be talking to them about it? And you mentioned they are overlooking a lot of things. And so I guess I'm wondering, what things are they overlooking? And are they, that you're referring to the city council, and you said people we vote in should know what is going on. There are too many unsolved shootings. So there seems to be a lot of stuff that came out of you then that seems to be really important to moving forward with the kinds of things that elected officials should be doing. Thanks.
Thank you. I just is you okay when we have to have we are professionals, should be professionals. Okay, we should be having professional who knows about behavior. Okay, and we have to preventive. They don't think about preventive. All they think about is let this situation happen and then put them in jail, find who did it and put them in jail. We're not thinking about the family, that is left to deal with this, or the trauma, one trauma after another, and not having the correct counseling, not even in school, and it's just getting to the point where enough is enough, and it's another body shouldn't have to be found in the street. We everywhere we go, we see memorials of somebody that have died, and just seeing the younger kids, how they're just, seeing their family member in caskets, and saying, they don't believe that they think they're still alive. These kids don't really understand what death is.
Yeah.
And then you imagine to have your mother or father killed, shot, and to have to deal with that. And then our city school district is not worth a quarter, and haven't been there for years.
I have something on that, but I'll wait. Not now. Yeah, you're right, Sheila. Absolutely. I'd like to kind of give some time here. Jason, I see you, but I want to give some time for a second. I just want to ask if there's folks who this is their first time. Hey, John, I saw coming in a few minutes ago, who would also like to contribute, just in terms of whether your analysis of the problem, or if you have potential solutions, or just anything that could shed some light on what we're dealing with. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of space and time for that. And then Jason, I do see you. I'll put you on the stack. Okay.
I just wanted to say, it was mentioned about educating young people about guns. And I agree that should be part of the solution. Just an introduction as to, what they are and the harm that they can cause, because as we know, the children are getting younger and younger who have access to these weapons. And I would much rather the children learn from an elected official or a law enforcement or a professional in the community the proper way, or the legal way to utilize, guns versus them learning from their peers who also don't know, or learning from the siblings of their peers or their older cousins the wrong ways to use guns and how dangerous they can be and the outcomes of that. So I do think we should be talking to, I would say as early as elementary school, at least just on a educational level about the consequences of misuse or abuse or misuse or abuse of guns, because we know they also serve a purpose if you are in danger and you need to protect yourself, things like that. But I think also that mirrors programs like DARE. I think DARE started in was that elementary school. I remember that program talking about drugs. So of course they weren't there to encourage the children to use them, but to educate them about, the effects of drugs and why you shouldn't use them and all the consequences that come with that. So I don't think we should shy away from giving our children that background information so they have accurate information as they grow older. And when they do encounter those situations or circumstances, at least they have, you know, um, correct knowledge to hopefully you make a wiser decision. Because of course, in our youth is when we do make the we tend to make more risky decisions, but at least they'll have a basis and they'll have an accurate basis of when they are in those types of situations. And I would say the other element as well is we're getting data, so we know who's typically committing these crimes and we know who the typical victims are. But I think there's an emphasis on quantitative. So how many people are being killed and how many people are going to jail? But I would love if there was a shift to focus on the qualitative components of that. So when we have these um, homicides or murders happening, we are finding out why. We're speaking directly to the people who committed these crimes and asking why, and not just storing that away in a police report, that is, just being filed away and never to be seen again. But what are we doing with that qualitative data? How are we implementing that into our programs? If we interview 100 or not students, but if we interview 100 people who have, committed, murder or homicide, are we going to look at their answers? And maybe we'll see that, of course, 100 is not a large number, maybe like, let's say 5,000. And we look at these 5,000 answers and 4,900 of them say, I feared for my life. So I decided to act first. We kind of have a starting point of like, okay, well, the people who live here are afraid to live here. So what can we do to make them feel safer? Again, instead of just storing this information away and focusing on the numbers, I think we need to take a more qualitative approach and using that qualitative data to feed into the programs that we're offering and trying to reduce violence here in the city.
Yeah, Katara, I am like 90% sure that Anthony Hall could speak to that, the qualitative. And when we do get him, and he is going to be here at some point, just not tonight. We'll definitely make sure to ask him about that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Could I add something to that?
Sure, Bonnie.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm sorry, I probably got not remembering all the names, but one of the things I've thought about for quite a while now is the fact that when you hear about a murder or some violent act, most of the time it's either months and months or never that there is shared with the public. You don't have to share people's names. I don't want to, that's not the point. But the characteristics of the violence, was it because they say that some of this is because of within the home kind of problems and people lose control, and then there's out in the community kind of a vengeance towards somebody that you see as your your enemy and all that. And that's been said, but I don't hear those things said in enough of, attached to the current, whatever that number is, that day or month or whatever, in detail. Because if you don't know what exactly the main, or at least here, what they're saying is one of the aspects of this, it's very hard to know, what to do, because not all mental health is the same thing. So and that's one of the things that I don't think it's been presented that much. So that is really important. And I think it's gotten worse too. Now, let me just quickly jump to the mass murderers, because one of the things that I as a social worker, especially, and just as a human being, I cannot believe that the number of the last few, and if in those situations, and they just released the one in Texas, there were 8, 10, 12 serious issues with these people that they knew about. The family knew about, the school knew about something, and something has gone wrong. Now, I would also say it is not easy to solve these things. There's no magic wand. It usually takes a lot of good long-term relationship building, having the person be able to really work through some of these, which is not an overnight thing. But the fact that all these things were visible, and maybe without taking too much time now, if we want to, having some experience with the history of mental health, there's some light I could probably, just from my own observation, point to that as to why it's not maybe what people think it is. And so therefore, the system has no label. So, oh, you did that? Oh, yeah, that wasn't too good. Have a good day. Goodbye. So, I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but that is not too far away from it. So I think that whole thing is really just, I can't believe that there was no follow-up with a lot of these people. When you see things that were really, I'm not talking about little teeny things, I'm talking about big things. That's almost unbelievable. But I think there's some things that are deeper in that conversation.
Okay, thanks. Jason, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So, hold on a second. So, first of all, I'd like to, I find all these observations very interesting and educational. So it's great to hear everyone's perspectives on them. I'd like to draw people's attention to the chat. I put in an email address for myself that you can contact me at if you would be interested in participating in the other gun conversation we've been having. Some of the people here are already a member of that group, but that conversation is specifically in relation to the mass shootings that we've been experiencing recently, which is not to say that it excludes any other gun-related conversations, but the impetus was the shooting in Buffalo, which was then quickly followed by the shooting in Texas. And so the New York State Greens are working with the Texas Greens to come up with a statement of principles that will hopefully begin to create a program for the Greens to collectively begin to address that particular situation. So I'm going to try to quickly give my 2 cents on what I think the real cause of these crimes are. And hopefully it won't appear too reductive, but for anyone whose interest is piqued, please contact me at the email address that I posted in the chat. I think we've been having these conversations for generations, and I think we're ignoring the obvious. The American public cannot be trusted with guns. The Second Amendment guarantees that you can have them, but clearly that's an obsolete portion of the Constitution. And however difficult it seems at first blush to think that we could ever change either the Constitution or at least fight the current gun control regime, which is controlled by the weapons industry and directly by the political parties that are beholden to them. There are solutions that do not require repealing the Second Amendment, but there is no solution that doesn't require very stringent gun control. And I am convicted that at long last, we have to face up to the facts. The reason we're having so much catastrophic violence, whether it is in the form of the Tops, fascist massacre or situations like Uvalde or Parkland or Sandy Hook, is because our nation has been flooded with guns, an unnecessary quantity of guns that have absolutely no purpose in self-defense. And those will necessarily have to fall into the hands of criminals and people who are reckless with guns. The statistic is often cited that there is like 10 guns for every person in this country. Well, that's a preposterous amount of guns. Naturally, they are going to be sold to the wrong people, either over the counter, which is the case in most mass shootings, or person to person in illegal fashion, which is often the case in street violence. But either way, the problem is the guns. And I do not see that anyone has, for at least 30 years since Columbine, and certainly for decades before that, no one has really come up with a solution that can subvert the problem without tackling guns directly. So I think ultimately all of us in the country who are concerned about this, we're wasting our time if we don't face up to the fact that gun control is the only real solution. And if you need any proof of that, just take a look at any prosperous country in the world that has violence far below ours. You'll also see that in almost every case, they have considerable restrictions on gun ownership. And even in those countries that are prosperous and that do allow citizens to own guns, they often have very tight controls on what kind of guns you can own, how many, and the process by which you're allowed to obtain them. Japan, Sweden, France, all these countries allow people to own guns, but they have a very different regime for gun control than ours. And the lack of gun violence in their country, I think, is a testament to the fact that unless you control guns and are very forceful in denouncing the regime of gun control that has been created for us by the gun weapons lobby, unless you are willing to denounce that, there is nothing that any conversation like this will ever accomplish, because the guns will always be there and they will create a vicious circle of people who are attacked with guns. The survivors or their friends or relatives or whatever will feel the need to acquire guns themselves and retaliate or defend themselves or just keep them. Sooner or later, those guns fall into the wrong hands or are used in the wrong way. I cannot see any solution that has ever been proposed that will achieve anything unless it includes an extreme rethink of our gun laws. And with that, I conclude.
Okay, Jason, or not Jason, I'm sorry, I apologize. I see Chris has his hand up.
Yeah, so I feel like, I have to offer a different point of view. One of the things Bonnie said that I thought was very insightful is that, when we see these people, I mean, because I know you're talking about mass shootings, there's all these warning signs that are just ignored. These warning signs that show that these people are mentally ill and we don't do anything about it. Japan's gun control didn't stop some guy from assassinating former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe with a homemade gun, right? I mean, if people are in that situation where they want to do that, like where they, and this may be, applicable to sort of just more low-level interpersonal conflict as well as assassinations. I mean, if you think your life is in danger or you feel that you want to kill somebody, like you can find a way. But what I think could be more effective is making people not want to kill people, right? I mean, these people, this is not ordinary people like you and me that just snap and go kill a bunch of people. These people are mentally ill and they need a doctor. And if we had, a greater investment in universal health care, so these people had the resources that they need, there are treatments for these things. There are people that there are medications, psychotherapy. I mean, millions of people with diseases like schizophrenia can lead normal lives, right? And then they're not ever going to hurt anyone, right? With a gun or a knife or anything else, right? So I think, we can make things better with gun control. But to actually stop the problem of violence means that we have to go for the reason that people want to commit acts of violence and not just sort of take away the tools and leave them with the desire for violence, because I think that's not really the answer. And it certainly doesn't heal them, even if it maybe stops them from hurting somebody else. And I think also on the lower level, like maybe lower level, not the spectacular level of mass shootings, not only healthcare, but things like food and shelter and education. When people don't have these things, they feel like they feel threatened, right? They may be threatened if they don't have, the resources they need to stay alive, and that makes them turn to crime. And of course, there's also things like conflict resolution, which can help in that situation. So I think that taking away the tools of violence, but leaving people with the desire for violence is not going to be a solution. It may be a partial solution, but it's never going to be, never going to take us to the kind of society that we want, right? I mean, this guy in Buffalo who was influenced by racist posts he found online, that's it. Okay, he didn't shoot anybody. Well, he still has these racist ideas, and he's going to talk to people, and he's going to spread these racist ideas. And without going after that ideology of racism, I think we're just leaving a danger at our backs. And if if they can't get guns, well, there may be something else that that's going to come out that's going to be dangerous.
I did see Linda's hand, but let me just do this really quick. So for folks who either aren't like Zoom masters, anything like that, or if it's like your first time here, if I saw Linda's hand, but if there's something you wanted to add to that, there's an electronic hand you can do under reactions, or if you're on your phone and you can't access those, if you just really quickly say stack, even if you're talking over someone, I'm paying attention. I have a mental, or I'll write down the list of who's next. So just for folks who if you're not don't do Zoom that much, you can just kind of already put it in the chat. I'm watching all of them and I will keep track of. So I see you, Linda, and that I am calling you next, but I just want to let other folks know who maybe have something to say. If you're not being, we want to make sure everyone's heard. So Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks. I just want to, there was something that Jason said that I just want to respond to first. Initially, and I don't think you meant this, Jason, but you said that all of these other countries have less violence than the America has. It's not that they have less violence, they have just as much violence. They have less deaths from guns. But the violence is still there. It's still a terrible social problem in Australia. And I think that we can't not notice that that's a result of capitalism, probably, and the kinds of societies that we live in. Capitalism incites violence. It's a very violent system, and so just getting rid of guns doesn't get rid of the violence and these terrible social problems. It just means that people have other means for carrying out violence against one another. I know as an Australian that domestic violence is terrible, kid violence is terrible, etc. But I guess it's, there is an argument that we made that by getting rid of, some of the guns, that less people die of guns, but it's just not a solution. And so I guess I'm on board with Chris there and in so many ways. But it's just interesting listening to Chris, and this is not a criticism, but Chris talked about universal health care at one point as a solution. And to me, that's a pretty big top-down thing. We need a government to put universal healthcare into practice. And I guess and then Chris also talked about conflict resolution. Well, that's not a top-down thing. That's something that comes from the bottom up. So how do you get those bottom up situations into place? And so, from a city council elected officials point of view, how can they make schools safer? I don't know what the relationship is between the city council and the schools, but we really seem to need more counsellors and more nurses and more psychologists. And can we look to city council for that, to put those into our schools? Smaller classes so teachers can get to know their students, and bunches of stuff at that kind of real minute level. Yeah.
Dave Stack.
Yes, but I can do a direct
Go ahead.
response, and then
Okay,
Bonnie, I'll
well-
come to you. So Linda,
Okay.
we've been talking all along, all of the meetings, that it's not just city council. So what Chris is talking about with stuff in schools, and actually in a few minutes, I'm going to share something that's school specific that we would take that to the school board, like the elected members. And there's a lot of the social services that have been mentioned, not just tonight, but the other meetings, those are county based. So we would have to go to Adam Bello or the county ledge. So yeah, there's no one body that, and again, like dealing with gun control and dealing with mental health, and I'm pointing like y'all can see who my screen or whatever, sorry. There is no one solution. It's multifaceted. And, we just have to figure out how much we can, I'll use the cliche, how much we can bite, can we bite off? How much can we chew? As that saying goes. So, Bonnie, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Oh, that's all right. Well, in terms of Jason's comments, I mean, obviously there's too many guns in this country, and it's just crazy, really. I mean, so we have to say that guns play an important role, because if your life is not too good and you're very frustrated and you're not getting help, and you have, let's say, somewhat relative access, or you have a friend or something, you can get a gun. It just makes it much more difficult, because a gun's a gun. So I think that's in it. But as others have said, is that there are a whole bunch of reasons why people get to a point where they are just either so frustrated, so angry, giving up, feel degraded. Being degraded is a really big piece of this, I think. And I think racism is also too, and has some corollary between racism and being degraded. They kind of are not far apart. And so I think it's hard to say if there's one thing that in the environmental life that, I think there's many things, and some people are maybe more susceptible to it than others. But and that's what's very disturbing in these days. There is so much more, in my view, authoritarian rule by people in this country and by people outside this country. And even if those people don't directly contact with the people we're talking about, when it's in the air, so to speak, and when you see it in other ways, that affects people. People don't just run away and say, "Oh, I didn't hear that." No, they hear it because if you rally or something like this, and you've got somebody that's putting out racism all the time and all terrible things, all those things, and it's more authoritarian, I think. And I don't have necessarily an easy answer for that, but that's a really, I think, that's becoming more and more serious in terms of, I don't know. I'm thinking for myself, I sometimes get this feeling that maybe it starts out as a little feeling, and then all of a sudden, as I look around, I say, "Oh my God, it's getting worse." I don't know how many other people feel, but that's how authoritarianism, I think, is really a very serious, situation that we have that's just gotten worse. And you get scared after a while, because how far is it going to go? How far are these people who? And part of that is that we do not, the media, one of my big gripes is the media, when you see these people, I'll just name, Trump, and there's others who really have a behavior pattern that represents pathology. And I'm not using that word just to be, oh, I know a word. It's really what it is. And yet there's not an opening. There's not a way. The media, none of these people open when they interview all these people thousands of times. I've not heard one of them, say, anything along that line in official sense. So, it just keeps going on and on and on. People get paid for, how many times I can interview these people. And it just becomes very difficult to kind of, you can't just go take a bath and have it wash away. And I think it affects people in a certain mode. So does and the two other things I would just quickly add is that the racism issue and the masculinity issue are huge issues. And also, I know what I'm saying. I'm just throwing things in here a little bit. There's something called the River School a few years ago. Just as the name implies, these are people that came to the city administration about 5, 6 years ago, and they wanted to create a program, you know, a full official school program. Wouldn't be the old, you know, this is just one outcome. And as it implies, it has a lot to do with, you know, people who have their life's work on the river and the water. But it was the most important thing of it was that it was a program. I just love the thought of this when I talk to these people. They wanted people, you know, students who, you know, if you're experiencing stuff at home and you're and all that, having contact with nature can really, I'm not saying it's a magic cure, but it really can make a huge difference. And the city, unfortunately, I didn't hear anything for a while. And I asked somebody, and they said, well, these people wanted to do they wanted to do anti-racism thing as part of their program. And they also wanted to have it in the public education sector, not the charter. And the city refused.
Yeah, I don't know if that probably was the city school district. I don't think the city would have.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for
Just-
clarifying that. You know, yeah,
All
no,
right.
you're right. That it
So-
was the school district.
Jason, I see your hand up. I'll call on you as facilitator, and then I will open it up one more time, and then I want to share the rough draft of the. Sorry, I'm being political guy here. The plank that I wrote. So I'm sorry, and I'll have to read it for folks who are on their phone. They might not be able to see it. I will. It's not long at all. It's not
Yeah,
on purpose.
okay,
It's not long. So
we'll
go ahead,
accept it.
Jace, and then Jason, and then I'll open it up for last thing, and then I'll share this example that we had decided we were going to do. So Jace, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I am personally receptive to all the points being raised by people regarding you know, anything from crisis of masculinity, capitalism and alienation, racism, poverty. All these things are connected. They are, you know, the guns play into that, and those things play into the gun violence too. So yeah, none of these things are in a vacuum, and I don't want my own perspective to be seen as too reductive, but I do think it's the elephant in the room, the problem of guns themselves. I think all this other stuff that we talk about whenever this issue of crime comes up tends to abstract the problem away from the real issue. I don't think anyone here, and I'll perhaps Chris, but I'll be happy to hear contrary points of view. I don't think anyone here really believes that if we got rid of guns, that all the violence and crime and horror that we're dealing with that has brought us into this particular conversation, I don't think anyone really believes that would be compensated for with knives or clubs or even cars. I think we all understand that gun violence itself is a very peculiar problem. It's a very peculiar, Linda's observation about Australia notwithstanding. I think we know that in this country, you're able to commit crimes with guns very easily because there's so many and because we have very lax gun laws. Unlike other countries where even if you want to commit violent crime or organized crime, like Japan, for instance, Japan has double-digit gun homicides every year, sometimes between as low as maybe 20, sometimes as high as 50. But compare that to our tens of thousands of gun deaths and suicides and cripplings and maimings every year. There's no comparison. And it's because they don't have a Second Amendment. They have the opposite of the Second Amendment. They make it very explicit in their laws that only under extraordinary circumstances are you allowed to own guns. Consequently, there's almost no gun violence. And they even have, and I mentioned this in the chat, they have a notorious organized crime syndicate known as the Yakuza, which we've all heard of. You would think that if anyone could get guns and commit horrible acts of mass murder or gang violence, it would be them. But even the Yakuza is restrained by Japan's dedication to restraining gun ownership. I think these facts speak for themselves. So when we talk about gun violence here in Rochester, just to bring it back home, we're talking about, you know, street crime, kids bringing guns into schools, gang violence, and all these things. All of these things are made possible explicitly because guns are so easy to get. If you take away the guns, I don't think any of us really think that bombings or knifings are going to just compensate for every gun crime. I don't think we think that if you take guns out of off the streets, that gangs are going to be knifing people with the abundance that people shoot themselves, because guns are a very particular kind of technology. They allow for a very particular kind of crime, which is why they need as much responsibility as we can muster before people should be allowed to have them the numbers they have, or even own them at all. I don't think, I'll just say one last time, I think we all know that guns themselves are specifically the problem. And although it would be slow going to take care of guns, and just as much as it would be to eliminate poverty or racism or anything else, you take away guns, you focus your energy on guns, you'll see that all sorts of problems that flow from the barrel of a gun, including the escalating cycle of violence, those problems will start to solve themselves. And a question of just to pick one, capitalist alienation or lack of purpose that a lot of people feel, put your energies to work banning guns, and you'll not only have a thing to do, but you'll also see real payoffs in the reduction in crime and reduction in social ill that comes from gun-related crime.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jason. I have a perfect way to segue to this into what I'd like to share, what I'd like to show you. So until this recent January, I was a teacher in the Rochester City School District, and I've done both at high school and middle school levels. And I can say, plus from my own just personal being a citizen, I don't remember too much happening in schools with guns, but a lot of violence, a lot of fights, gang activity, things like that. And as like Sheila was talking about in terms of getting to kids while they're young and where we're going now. And if anyone who knows me or has paid attention at all, at the least, like the times I've run for both school board and city council, I usually just don't have one issue. So I am going to share one idea, but if you really force me to, I've got plenty. But I'm just going to, like we promised, we're going to just stick with, like, for each kind of situation or each topic, we're just going to stick with one thing. Again, it's that biting off more than you can chew sort of thing. So from my experience in schools, and particularly in the city of Rochester, if you talk to anyone at the district office or some individual schools, they will tell you that they use restorative justice techniques with any in terms of discipline. But if you're actually in the school, there is no restorative justice practices happening, right? So if somebody comes into the school and says, well, let me see what you guys do restoratively, there's probably a binder somewhere, maybe some posters or something like that. But when kids act aggressively or do something that they're not supposed to, the actual practice of restorative means, whatever you want to call it there, isn't really happening. It is the kid leaves class, 10 minutes later, the kid's back in class, nothing's been solved, and the behaviors are still going on and escalating, right? So from that, I took, and now I'm going to share my screen, a really quick blurb, and I know folks who are on the phone, I will read it. I think it's 2 sentences, all right? So something that we could call for, and the language is very rough, it would need to be polished, all that kind of jazz, and it's actually, the first sentence is grammatically horrible, but I'm not an English teacher. The Rochester City School District should actively de-emphasize government-issued or mandated curriculum and instead emphasize social emotional learning infused literacy. The district must also insist that every school put restorative practices in place to handle behavioral issues. Now, included in that is evidence that these practices are happening. Right now, I'm not reading now, I'm just explaining. That was the whole thing. That was but we'd have to make sure within our advocacy that there is stuff in place, because you go downtown to this district office, they're going to say, we do restorative practices, and they don't. And they can give you binders and folders and stuff that with shiny, glossy, color printed stuff that shows smiling kids and circles of people discussing their problems, but that rarely happens in a lot of these schools because there isn't time. And one of the main reasons, trying not to become the teacher who's griping, but because of the overemphasis on coverage of curriculum and standardized testing, there's not the time. 2 kids have a problem, elementary school, middle school, high school, and they come out and they're talking to an administrator. There is pressure to get those kids back into classroom so that they can get instruction to get ready for tests. And the state is not going to buy this. Years ago, I don't know if they still do this, the district in Brighton didn't have to give Regents exams. They went to the state and they said, look, we do our own exams that are harder than yours. We don't need to use your exams. And the state went, cool, all right, no problem. So for years, Brighton never had to do Regents exams for their students because their stuff was harder. Now, we might have to do, and when I say we, I mean the district, literally those people on the school board might have to commit acts of civil disobedience and say, no, we're not going to do, you tell us we have to teach all of these things. We're going to do literacy, but we're going to do it based on restorative practices. And so we're still teaching kids to read and write and communicate and all the things that are real world skills, but we're doing it in the context of not memorization of dates and facts, but we're doing it in terms of how to interact and how to deal with conflict and getting the kids while they're young, so that when there's that, and this is where I was hoping Anthony would be able to come in and, you know, while they have that pressure to join gangs, there won't be as much of that because kids know how to deal with stuff. But it's only going to happen for real if we de-emphasize this drill and kill stuff with standardized testing, because not just the teachers, the administrators, and even downtown, they're under pressure from the state and federal governments to make sure the test scores line up. So we want to say, oh, this is great, Dave, there's 2 sentences you just read, but there's some behind the scenes stuff that the district can't do it if they're being forced to focus on really horrible ways of teaching, of education that we know don't work. So really anything that, if we decided to do this and do advocacy on a bunch of things, if we did something for schools, personally, because I would suggest, let's pick one thing for schools, one thing in terms of poverty, one thing, you know, and just work on those things. One thing, maybe, I don't know, Jason, this is why I was asking, could you do research on what a municipality could do about gun control? Right. Yes, I get, man, I would be an advocate of abolish the Second Amendment. I would love that. That would be great. But I mean, well, what can a locality do? What could the city or the county? And I have no idea. So that's why I was, because you've been focused on guns, and that sounds a weird sentence, but you've been focused on guns. I just thought that would be up your alley for what this group's trying to do. And I know you're working on national stuff with that other group. But in this context where we might be talking to city school board, city council, county ledge, that sort of thing, what can we do about guns at a local level? This would help in terms of aggressiveness, maybe some of the masculinity stuff Bonnie talked about. But it's still a heavy lift. I ran for school board like 20 years ago now on things like this. And man, nobody wanted to hear, what do you mean don't teach the tests? What do you mean get rid of tests? And people were freaking out. So I'll leave this up. We can keep talking. I'll leave this up. I know there's folks who can't see it, but I'll still leave it up if we want to pick it apart, if you have any comments. I do have 3 bullet points underneath. One is, and these are just notes, fight state and federal governments about curriculum and assessment. 2 is, the second one is just says brain development, and I could literally do 2 hours on that, but I won't. And then the last one is in quotes, hope. If you've noticed, the mayor has been having these events that are supposed to be bringing hope, which I agree is important. And that's one of the reasons I think we have a lot of violence and gun violence, is the kids coming up don't have hope because of all the things Chris has been talking about. No mental health services, no real hope that there's a future for them, that there's going to be well-paying jobs, that the only good paying jobs are going to be on the street selling. And so this kind of thing will help present hope for kids. Not everything. Again, we know there's no one solution, So that was, I wanted to do this as a rough draft as an example. And I'm going to go to a different, I'm going to keep sharing my screen, but go to a different thing. The notes here from our very first meeting. Or actually, no, let me go to notes of the second meeting. This list that we came up with of things to deal with, that if we had one thing for each one, and for folks who can't see it, we have food, clothing, shelter, gangs, healthcare / mental health, drug selling and use, reduced number of guns, more alternatives to incarceration, and generically it says schools. That we could have one thing for each in the guise of not biting off more than we can chew. So I do see Jason's hand. It sounds like also Bonnie, wants to chime in as well. So, and
we'll have a dialogue a little bit.
Okay, so Jason, go ahead, and then anybody else who wants to.
Okay, so actually, I'm willing to defer if someone else wants to go first. I know I've chatted quite a bit. I don't want anyone else not to get a chance, but I would like to talk explicitly about some ideas I've had that dovetail with what you were just talking about regarding schools, Dave. So if I can go now, or I can let someone else go ahead.
Okay, let me.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
You tell me.
Yeah, Bonnie, go ahead.
Just one of the things that I think was all the things we have talked about and things maybe we haven't talked about yet have to do with this both the kind of the climate of authoritarianism, the loss of people with hope, the practical matters of housing and all that stuff. The issue here of a new kind of approach with justice and decency and all that. I feel very, and because of the environmental issues, so here's the connection. I really feel strongly that, I don't mean this to be 100% the answer, but I really feel that if we could, connect some of the environmental, not just the problem side of it, but in some ways you always do that when you do the positive part of the environment. But to me, a lot of the folks and a lot of things we're talking about have such a kind of I guess a violent and a hard-nosed kind of thing. And what you can do with justice kind of approaches is you can show people and introduce them in a kind of quiet, nice way that the environment, the things around you, which I think that's why I was so interested in that river program. I think things around people like that. In fact, they're doing something. Do you hear the Greece school district, the things they're going to do around the environment? And I think these things, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be 100% the whole, but I think these things are really, really important because it has, and like all of us, if you spend some time in the environment, or if you're angry, upset one day, and you go out and there is something good that happens. And I think a lot of these things could be. I'm not. And for to Jason, I don't think this is something, and I'm not saying this is something that gets rid of guns. But I think this kind of atmosphere, and with all the positives, and as many we could name, along with the justice approach, which I think this is a justice approach, what I'm trying to say, is because then you have people in a frame that it's not about, am I the best of this? Am I it really softens in a good sense those and offers people exposure to things they may have been involved with very little. So I would like to, we could talk more detail, but I would like to make a strong suggestion that some of it be very, very consciously part of the environmental kind of, this is corny, but kind of the love of the environment, I think would be a wonderful way to incorporate what Dave is saying.
Bonnie, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I want to make sure I'm understanding. When you say because I just got done talking about schools, and a lot of times when we talk about schools and like teacher talk, when we say environment, do you mean like literally the environment, like tree hugging, environment? Is that
Well,
what you mean?
I like jogging, but no. Well, I mean, environment can mean a lot of things. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, that's why I mentioned the river program.
Okay. Yeah.
It shows.
So it does.
You know what I'm saying? But it's it's the emotional support, the emotional benefits you get from the environment that you want to. And you don't want to make it too wishy-washy, but.
In my mind, I hear in
yeah.
my mind. So like when you get teachers together and they use that word environment, they're never talking about like outside. They're talking about what posters you have in your room. So I just wanted to make sure. Okay. I wanted to make sure I understood where you're going. You civilians.
I want the real thing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. No, I'm clear. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Jason, but I will say this before you go ahead. So like when maybe it was in my head that I thought, so whatever you're about to say, I might end up with me saying, cool, next time we get together, could you have something like I had for schools? Could you have something for guns? But feel free, go ahead. Say what you
All right, sure. So you've got some good and practical ideas about restorative justice, which I really like. I think we all probably like that here, and I think those are necessary. So what I'm going to say is kind of raw, and it should be taken as such. But it does go along with an idea I've had for how to advance the other agenda that I've been talking about. For those of you who haven't attended some of the other conversations or read any of my tedious op-eds that I've written online, I've got a pretty aggressive stance that I'd like the Green Party to take if I could convince them. Against gun retailers and the gun industry itself. So to circle that back to what you're suggesting, so what I'm about to say might be a little too outrageous, at least in its initial conception, but it sort of, if it could be refined and turned into something appropriate for the Green Party and for the public, there might be something there. I've thought for a while that part of the solution to how to bring the problem of mass shootings to a head, which in this case also involves any kind of school shooting. I do hate to always be talking about mass shootings because I think I'm afraid that people here might think that I'm not concerned about gun violence of all varieties or violence in general. Of course, I'm appalled by all of it, but you got to start somewhere. I've thought that the Green Party itself should run school board candidates on with an agenda of encouraging a strike on behalf of both students and teachers over this issue. And now that seems pretty radical, but my thinking is this: whether it's daily gun violence or any kind of violence in schools, but especially the mass shootings, both the students and the teachers are basically being thrown to the wolves. The students are lambs to the slaughter, and the teachers more and more are taking the blame for things that are out of their control. We're told that we have to arm teachers. In North Carolina, they recently started stacking up AR-15s in the schools so that the school is ready for a mass shooting, as though they're necessarily going to be able to just go to their local armory in the basement and pull out guns and start shooting up the schools in retaliation. This situation is absurd, and gun violence in schools of all varieties has been a huge problem for so long. I think we've gotten numb to the fact that this is absolutely outrageous. So if I were to contribute a concept to what you're doing, this would be something that would maybe supplement your more practical but useful ideas with something that might have a little bit of pepper to it. Might be at least something worth discussing that would sort of break the ice with the public. Maybe even pave the way for your better ideas, because people might say, oh, well, this is a ridiculous thing the Greens are putting forward, and then we could whittle it down to something more realistic. But I would say that we should, as Greens, as Greens in Rochester, as Greens in New York State, and as Greens nationally, we should try to solicit teachers to support our agenda of grinding this problem to a halt and saying that what we need is a very specific campaign of walkouts, of strikes, of students refusing to attend class because they've been educated to realize on this issue that they are just being that no one is doing anything for them to stop this problem. That the guns and the mass shootings, we basically decided that there is a certain acceptable level of ultra violence that we will tolerate rather than do something about the guns. And I think we need to educate students and teachers, because I think the teachers would be our natural ally, that we are on their side and we are prepared to do what is necessary to bring this situation to a head so that we will no longer tolerate, under any circumstances, these mass shootings. And to conclude that, I want to remind everyone, the clock is already ticking towards the next school shooting. There will be another Uvalde soon. It'll be within a year, 6 months, 18 months. It's going to happen again and again and again and again until we finally say we have had enough. Now, for me, the camel's back has been broken, and that's why I'm so enthusiastic about this. But I think the Green Party, and anyone who's willing to hear the Green Party's message, hopefully that's many people in this room, have got to say, it's like, look, we can draw a line and really decide to win, to get people on our side. And I think teachers would be our natural allies in this, because they are the ones who are being told, more often than not, they're being told that they're the criminals for not having guns, for not having shot back, for not having locked the door. It's obscene. And I think if we were, Dave, to get back to your more prudent but useful ideas, if we were to at least present that message to local teachers or local school board and say, look, we've recognized that this is out of control. We could at least, if we were angry yet resolved enough, I think we could attract a large number of both teachers, parents, and students to an agenda that would then pave the way for the kind of things that you're describing in the thing that you just shared on screen. But I think we do need to at least propose, if not necessarily, leap head first into, but we do at least have to propose very radical options. So at least we get this agenda on the table. We get people saying, wait, are people this fed up with these Holocausts? And I think the answer is yes. We have to make people realize that there is a segment of our population that is that fed up and is willing to do what it takes. Then we can move towards pragmatic applications of that philosophy. But first, we have to get people realizing that we're willing to do what the Democrats will not do.
Okay. Can I say a quick thing?
Sure, Bonnie, go ahead.
Just a quick thing. Well, with all of this stuff, and this is maybe, a given people realize, is that we've, in the past, with some of the things I was mentioning and some of the things that are from the past, is that there's been a real, there's been some attempt, but not a truly successful effort to really organize parents. And I think that's the other group, of course, that both sometimes has some behaviors that perhaps don't always help their child, but that's part of life. But that parents, without organizing parents around this stuff, I think it's going to be much, much, much harder. Now, not that it's easy to organize anything really of a large scale, but I think and it's been a problem. I mean, when some of the people a couple of years ago ran for office, there was a lot of discussion among them about, how the practical things of organizing. There's the philosophical things, but the practical things, and something I've always found true is you need some parents, not just the parents that are joining you here and there and all that, which is important, but you need parents who really, and people who really will hang in there to make sure that the organizing is, continued. Because what happens a lot of times is you get something going and then it kind of poops out because, these things aren't just easy. I mean, they're doable, but they're not that easy. And I think it would be really important, especially combining some of these things, as Dave was saying, because I think the parents want to see. I'm trying to beat to death the river school, but anything like that, I think they are also looking for some of that. I remember a comment that was made maybe a year or so ago in that direction, and they didn't, name a particular thing, but you could tell because people kind of want to feel that something more delightful, something more appealing is also happening at the same time all these terrible gun things are happening. So, but I really think there would have to be some organizing of parents, because that's like, it would be almost impossible for me to see how you would do this without that.
Well, I would just comment, and I want to kind of like pick on some people, although I won't do it by name,
go ahead.
we haven't heard from in a while. But I will just say, for the last few minutes, we've been talking a lot about this more strategy and tactics, and we don't have a goal yet.
Yeah.
So we're working on the goal, I thought. So, but what you're saying isn't like, oh my God, that's horrible, Jason. Oh my God, that's horrible, Bonnie. It's like, I just don't know if we're there yet. We're still working on what we're trying to achieve. So, yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just like, I don't know if we're there yet. Yeah.
Well, what's Dave? What would your ultimate goal be?
Well, man, all right, I'll just come out and say it. I was trying not to, but a lot of the things that people, that the Green Party, and again, this isn't supposed to be a Green Party thing, but candidates that have run as Greens, let's just be honest, the stuff that we have run on before, our ideas, our platform planks, really would deal with gun violence, would deal with violence. All these, and so but it's not going to inspire anybody if, the people who have run, if Bonnie, you've run too, if like the 5 or 6 Greens that have run to say, here's our platform plank again, really, we really should do it this time. Yeah. I mean, we want to involve people, and there are also might be ideas that I've in the city of Rochester, I've had family members who are victims of gun violence, right? But my experience is different than like Sheila's and anybody else's. So not just getting the people who have been saying stuff about healthcare and poverty and the stuff I've been saying about schools, but getting other folks as well. And so I'm just saying we need more folks, and whether they agree exactly with the stuff that we've been talking about personally. But Jason, I'm sorry to answer your question more directly. All the stuff the Greens have been running on, if we did that, we would fix the whole world. But
yeah, that's good.
Well, I'm being a little facetious, but not really. Not really.
No. Well, one thing I would, maybe this is also a political kind of statement, but just imagine, would you think going to, let's pick out 2 or 3 people who are on city council right now, the ones who we thought would be, said they wanted to be Greens, but then turned something else. So, I don't have to use names, but
I know who you're talking about.
Who they are. So, I mean, I think don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're the be all and end all if they say, no, we're not going to do it. I'm just saying, I would be curious as to, and, I think theoretically they probably would like it, but are they willing to actively, that's the issue there. Anybody can say, oh yeah, I like this, that sounds good. But you need to have the people, and I don't, this is a little observation. I see some of these people being activists when they're running for office, and I'm not saying they're being anti-activists in their office, but boy, you don't see much of the stuff going on.
The fire.
Now, I don't want to be too critical. Yeah, I don't want to be so critical. This stuff takes a lot of time out of people's lives, so I don't want to sit there and say, well, you want to do it. But I've seen somewhat of a turning the head the other way without anybody seeing you. So that's just a comment. But so I would be curious as to whether or not they would support it.
I'm sorry. Linda, was your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just really quickly. I'm all for civil disobedience, as people know, and student-teacher strikes and walkouts, I think, are fabulous ideas, but they need to be really organized, and you need to have an ask. So, Dave mentioned, we're talking strategy and tactics. I think they're really great strategies and tactics, and they can really pull punches where they need to be pulled, by withdrawing labor or students for classrooms or teachers to teach, that kind of thing. But what would the ask be? And, I'm just thinking about Extinction Rebellion's theory of change. And when it comes to civil disobedience and having asks in mind, it's usually something very, very simple and pared down. It's a winnable demand. So I feel that it wouldn't be a platform that you were going on strike for, or asking students to go on strike for. It would be just something very winnable and something very simple that might at least get something else into train after that. And I also like the idea of students organizing amongst themselves. You know, are there youth clubs at schools, and opportunities for students to figure out what it is that upsets them most about violence in the city, and how they're impacted, and what would their ask be?
Well, there's somebody on the call who has a group called Rochester Youth Means Change.
Yeah, that's right.
Sheila.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Hi, Sheila. I know I'm calling people out by name. Sorry. Well, let me. Why don't we do this? Because we are close to 2 hours, and how about this? So, with the example I gave, and again, this isn't Dave deciding this is one of the things that we're doing. It was just an example of. I was hoping that people might take things that they're interested in, and maybe create another 2-sentence. I'm sorry, I'm thinking, I'm using political terms, but like a plank, a platformy thing, or whatever, an idea, a demand, whatever term you want to use. I think Jen Keys, who's been here the first 2 meetings, she's the one who's actually out with COVID, so that's why she's not here. I think she was working on a mental health one, because that is her field. Oh, so I think, but again, she couldn't. She's been kind of down for the count for a while, so she wasn't ready anyway. So by the next time we get together, I'm thinking that she might have something. But does anybody want to take something else? I mean, Chris, you talked about single payer. I mean, is there something that we could do as a group and get more people in? I mean, it might have to be helping the group that's already working on single payer, because I know you just brought it up.
Yeah, there's already. Yeah,
but we could help them. I mean, we could do something to help them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's anybody that has an interest in something specific that would want to do that 2-3 sentence kind of thing and bring it to the next time we come together.
Yeah. Well, I still like the idea that you said, so that, and the fact that my interest, the whole thing would be your interest, but would be, again, putting some of these things that I think add a quality to people's lives, both in the various ages and in the particulars and all that are not being done that much now. I don't think students. I don't mean you spend 24 hours outside in the trees, although sometimes that seems nice. I am talking about the value of these environmental things, and there are many of them, so it doesn't have to be one. Are very, very important. I mean, what do people do? When they are, hurting so much, you could probably name a few other things, but I think in the environmental connection, and I think the reason I mentioned the Greece thing, because evidently they're catching on to this, and it sounds like it's a, kind of a go. Hopefully it doesn't get too minimalistic and then means nothing. But I just think that, so I could see using that in what Dave was saying. And it's what's the word? It's invigorating for people to be, that's another feeling that I would say we should be conscious of, is what we're going to do and bring with it some feelings of being invigorated, being, the hope thing again. I think you can overdo the whole thing, but it's good, to put in there. So because, even the extinct going for the environment, it has some emotional direction, because it's trying to say to people, listen, this is what you want to not have. So I really think that switch of emotion to these kinds of things is really important in these issues we're talking about as a non-medicine medicine.
So So would you?
So I like yours. Yeah, I like
Well,
yours.
again,
I
we
mean,
need.
I can add this part to it, but I don't right now. I'm not thinking of a brand new one so much.
Well,
I don't
you know
know
what?
to
From
asking.
listening to people speak, and I know I said we don't have goals, but I might get into a strategy or tactic thing, sort of. But maybe it'd be easier for whatever this group it constitutes. I mean, there's people who have been here but aren't, so we have more people. But maybe we should just pick a goal for each governmental body. Like if we choose the one I did, we have one goal for the city school board. So we need one thing to demand from city council. We need one thing to demand from the county that helps with violence. So, and Bonnie, maybe something about nature might be the one for something. It depends on what the demand would be.
I would like to see the city council do something like consider putting together a citizens assembly, and the citizens assembly would have Sheila and directly experientially affected by this. It would have Kateria in it. Yeah, there's very specific ways that citizens assemblies are put together, but they're, yes.
I just have a question. I have a question on that. So when you say
Yeah.
citizen assembly, do you mean that's focused specifically on violence? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so
okay.
it would
I just want to make sure I'm clear.
It would be a citizens assembly put together of people from Rochester, and you make sure that all of your demographics are represented in terms of gender, race, religion, class, what have you, but they are randomly selected. And just to deliberate on the problem of violence in the city, listen to experts, deliberate on it, and come up with a set of policies for the council to vote on. But it's a form of direct democracy. It's from the grounds up, and I think that solutions should come from the people and those that are mostly affected by them. And I think that would be a good thing for the council to have. Would be an advisory committee based people, purely of people that are most directly affected by this.
Yeah, well, can I ask a question? Would that mean
my hand up for a while now?
Okay, Jason and then Bonnie.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to, because Linda said something earlier, I wanted to respond to, because it's a salient question. What are our requests? What can we actually achieve? What can we say? Here is, 1, 2, 3 things we want, and how do we get them? How do we get them is the question. But what do we want is of course very important. I've had one idea, and it somewhat relates to the question of violence in Rochester, but also is part of the overall gun thing that I've been talking about. But I think they both work together, and they both require community activism and input to accomplish. And it's the most extraordinarily simple thing that we could ever ask that I think would actually make a big difference. And I can only imagine how hard it would be to get. And that is an apology from the gun stores, or even the cities that host the gun stores. For example, the massacre in Buffalo. The kid came from somewhere in New York State, but he bought his gun, an AR-15, at a quaint little gun shop in Endicott, New York. That gun store, I'm sure, is licensed somehow. I'm sure it requires some sort of authority from the city to operate. I'm sure that the owner of the gun store is regretful, but has he apologized? Would he? Would the city council, if there is one in Endicott, New York, would they issue an apology just to say, not to take accountability? They're not responsible for what this lunatic did, but the very notion that anyone ought to make peace with the citizens of Buffalo or the victims' families, and just say, hey, look, we're sorry this happened. We don't know what they don't go. I'll let them phrase it if they ever do it. But I've had that idea that is something that we should push for after massacres, that the gun stores and or the city governments of the towns that are the controlling body over the gun store Like in Uvalde, Texas, there was a gun shop there. They sold not one but two combat weapons to the guy who shot up the school. Did they apologize? Of course not. No one ever apologizes. I think that is the most simple and basic request that we could make, just to, if we were to not break but at least bend the gun lobby at all, it would be to put our full force into demanding apologies from the people who are arming these terrorists. And if we could elicit, is that the right word? If we could extract even one apology from one gun shop that armed a terrorist and say, yes, maybe what we need to do is rethink our policy of how we sell these guns, or maybe we should allow the gun, maybe we should talk to our own lobby and say, you know what, you're pushing too hard to not get changes in the law that would prevent this. If we get even one gun shop to just apologize, that could be a world of difference. And that's the sort of thing we might be able to get support from through students and student groups, if such exist at that level, teachers, parents, those kind of groups. If we could at least get them saying, you know what, at least something has to be done. And if we can't overthrow the Second Amendment, or if we can't force through gun control legislation, the very least we could do is let our anger be known and our despair be known, and demand that the people who, besides the killers, who have a responsibility, if not the blame, but certainly a responsibility for this violence, because the gun retailers are the ones selling the guns, and they're the ones doing it willy-nilly without asking any questions. If we get even one to just say, you know what, I'm sorry, we ought to change, that itself, I think, could make a world of difference. And that's the sort of thing that we could make a request for and organize a campaign around. Might seem a little abstract, but I actually do think it would be creating a chink in the armor for this unassailable gun industry that is, in my view, the major component of all the gun violence in this country.
I think, Jason, that gun owners and gun store owners actually have immunity, special protections from even being implicated in mass shootings. I think that there's a law there that says if there's a mass shooting, they're protected from scrutiny, or from that the victims cannot go and
they're more or less inoculated
against a gun owner. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. Of course, we can't sue them. I'm not suggesting that, but something has to break, and we can't allow. Look, there is the culture and the will of the citizenry that has to precede any change in the law, because until the people are motivated, they can't take control of the situation. They can't elect the people who will change the laws. And in order to do any of this, in order for any legislative solution to arise, we first have to basically take the bull by the horns and not wait for the legislature to do what has to be done. Yes, they do have laws that protect them and indemnify them from lawsuits. Those laws are criminal in themselves. Those laws should not exist. But we can't
be overturned. Yes.
But we can't change them until we create outrage. And like I said, if we could just prove how the links that a gun store or a gun company would go to just to not apologize, if we could even prove that they would do anything to not even be that civil, that alone could humiliate them better than 1,000 billboard campaigns.
Okay, Bonnie, you were next, and then I want to do a last chance for folks who haven't spoken much or yet to speak, and then we got to figure out what to do for next time, and make sure we have time for announcements like we usually do.
Okay. Quickly, I had a thought when the discussion a minute ago was around city council. One of the things that I mentioned too, that one of the things I have been giving a lot of time to in the last few years is grassroots organizing in neighborhoods, and the city is very weak in opening up dialogues, because the way the city council works is you have an issue, you get 2 minutes, and then that's it. And then they have committee meetings, but people can't go to 4 committee meetings a week or a month, and so it becomes just that group. I would say, in looking at that issue, it would, to my thinking, it would have to be opening up to the grassroots people who live in these neighborhoods. You know, they're talking now about the downtown and building up things and everything, and that's been a big all of a sudden because they half the city didn't know anything about it. And what happens is we get, you know, people that are kind of tuned into certain, you know, environments of having things, and others don't get heard at all. So anything that does involve city council, there needs to be a dialogue. In fact, one of the things that we've just put in our plan for this group is that there will be not just a 2-minute talk at city council and then that's it. That we're asking all the city council members to have at least every other month a totally open presentation and exchange dialogue between the people and the various city council, because you know they have districts, so you can kind of, and to have that so that we can have some dialogue. And also, by the way, we need to have some of these, with all the money issues, we need to have some of the state people coming who also, you know, the federal money comes to the state people. So, you know, there's all these things that are, you know, being suggested. And we need to find a way so that we're not having to have 5,000 little meetings and that's gotten worse lately. There's not a lot of across the board communication or decision making. Decision making is kind of like, well, who made that decision? I mean, you voted this way. There hasn't been enough dialogue, in my opinion, on a lot of these things lately, which partly the pandemic, because people, you know, are stretched out and tired and everything. But it's become very problematic, and so we've asked for that whole thing to change, which would help what you're saying, would help it, because all you're going to get if you just keep it to the city council members is this: that one talk to that one, that one talk to this one, but they don't necessarily. They think they outreach to people because they talk to 5 people in one neighborhood. No, that's not. I want open meetings. I want public open meetings. If people want to have a separate meeting on an issue, that's fine. But I want to have open meetings. So we don't have dialogue. We have these people running around and saying things and having interviews on XXI, and they have set up questions already that the candidate, not the candidate, but the elected person already knows the answers. So it's like, you know, here's my question. Oh, we already know the answer that you have to that, but instead of having more of an open kind of dialogue. So thanks for let me say that. But.
Okay, thanks. So is there like, I put something in the chat. I don't know if they can see it for the person who's on here, who's been on, we haven't heard from at all. And I know this gets a little awkward when you do this, but does Vacant Vera, that's the name that's on the screen. I mean, you haven't, and you don't have to by all means, but I just want to make sure that there's space for you to, if you have anything that you want to say or ask, that you have that opportunity. So I'm sorry, I hope it's not awkward that I'm specifically asking as one individual, but I just want to make sure. And Sheila, same with you. If it's just been a while since we've heard from you, and I just want to make sure if you had the space, if you had anything you wanted to say or ask before we like figured out the next time we were going to get together, because it's been almost 2 hours we've been here. So anything? Okay. All right. So I have to admit, I was a bad activist earlier tonight. I just kind of took it upon myself when Anthony Hall said that he couldn't make it. I asked if next week, same time was okay, because it was okay this week. So I thought maybe Tuesday at 7 is usually good if something isn't going down. So I took it upon myself to ask Anthony if that was okay. So if I have not heard back from him yet, because he had to go and deal with whatever it is that's happening. So if it's okay, because I really want Anthony to come and talk with us, because his experience and his take on things is like really, I think is really important. I think it's very helpful. So I hope folks don't mind that tentatively. I know we've gone at least a couple of weeks between meetings, but I kind of took it upon myself to say, hey, how about next Tuesday?
What's
and if
the date?
Let me look it up.
You know what the date
The
is?
30th. It's the 30th.
Okay. Okay.
So if that's okay, I mean, I have everybody's email address and including the people who aren't here tonight. So if Anthony's okay with that, if he's not, then I'm going to have to throw it open and we'll have to figure it out by email to when the next time we're going to get together. But I hope everyone's okay with me saying, asking Anthony if he's okay next week, same time,
Yeah,
same
sure.
channel. Okay. And then
Okay.
as we usually like to do here in this space, if not about what we've been talking about, or it can be, if you have anything, announcements of like events happening that you want to like tell everybody about, now would be the chance. I'm tired, so I'm just going to open it up. Anybody got something they need to announce?
See what are we doing here?
Yeah, I could see, Linda, you're thinking about it. You don't want to do it yet? That's fine. We can wait till next Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll just say, so Extinction Rebellion have got their next die-in
Yeah, I was
coming up
I would say
on
that. Yeah.
the 8th of September. And it's
Yes.
coinciding with a big demonstration happening in DC around the dirty deal that Chuck Schumer brokered with Joe Manchin to get Joe Manchin to sign on to the Inflation Reduction Bill. There's going to be another piece of legislation coming up at the end of September to do with making it way more easier for fossil fuel companies to get permits for pipelines and opening up lands for oil and drilling and things like that. And so we've got that coming up, and there's something else coming up on the 16th, but yeah, I'd like to tell you all about that later.
After tomorrow?
Yeah, after
Yeah,
tomorrow.
okay.
Yeah. So thanks everybody. Really great discussion.
I'll give a non-announcement. We are working on for the Green Party a monthly meeting, which is kind of like we were going to do tonight, but really focused Green Party thing. So I know this is also my way of reminding him. Jason is working on getting a guest speaker for next month, who's to speak about the I'm going to butcher it, that business improvement district that the city council is trying to ram through. So we're working on it. We don't have
that's the one. No, go ahead.
Well, we don't have the specifics yet, but from our steering committee meeting last night, that's where Jason's trying to work on the speaker for that. So all I can say is stay tuned. That seems to be what's coming next for next month. So
yeah, can I just quickly say, Jason, please talk to me, because some of us have been working on this kind of behind the scene, because that's the only way that we knew about it. And Ted Forsyth, he also, so we've got pieces, and this is one of those things that's kind of a big thing. So if you get too many pieces, we're going to kind of collide at some point. So we don't do it right now, but Jason, if you could call me, because I asked them 3 months ago. I mean, you have to realize this is something that's been going on for months and months and years, really. And I haven't gotten the document yet. But there's a couple of things going. There's something with the universities too, and Xerox and all that kind of stuff. So, and maybe, I don't know, Jason, what would you think? Maybe if Ted, you and I got together or something, so we don't, we could kind of come together or something, so we're not kind of, doing pieces with outside of that.
I'm trying to get a meeting with this woman Kelly and Alex when he's feeling better, because I know he's pretty sharp about this stuff. So you could come along with that if I'm able to arrange like a coffee or lunch or something. That was a plan I already had, so maybe you could participate with that.
Ted, actually, you know what? Because I'm about to talk about people, I'm going to stop recording. And so if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks y'all. Bye.